The Beast of Bangalore. Prelude. The Beast Awakens. The monsoon had retreated, leaving Bangalore shimmering under a deceptive veil of post-rain clarity. But beneath the polished sheen of wet streets and the vibrant hues of newly washed saris, a tremor of fear persisted. The whispers started subtly like the rustling of leaves before a storm, then grew into a chilling chorus, the Beast of Bangalore. The first victim, Govindan Chettiar, a spice merchant whose laughter once echoed through the Russell Market, was found near the fragrant chaos of the Lalbagh Botanical Garden. His body was a grotesque tapestry of gashed flesh and splintered bone, the scene painted in a horrifying crimson. The initial shock quickly morphed into terror as similar discoveries followed. A night watchman near the Mysore lamps factory, a flower seller on the outskirts of Malleswaram, each ravaged with a primal ferocity that spoke of a predator far beyond the stray dogs and occasional wild boars that sometimes wandered into the city limits. Inspector Raghavan, a man whose neatly trimmed moustache and calm demeanour belied the storm brewing within him, surveyed the latest horror. This time it was a young tailor, his small shop near Avenue Road stained with an unimaginable brutality. Raghavan squatted beside the body, the stench of iron thick in the air. His experienced eyes, usually sharp and discerning, were clouded with a disquiet he couldn't quite place. The wounds were undeniably savage, the tearing visceral, yet something felt off. "The beast is growing bolder," Inspector Sergeant Kumar, a young officer whose face was pale beneath his khaki turban, muttered, his voice tight with apprehension. "They say it's a Rakshasa, a demon in tiger's skin." Raghavan straightened, his gaze sweeping over the frenzied activity of the forensic team. "Demons don't leave physical wounds, Kumar. This is the work of flesh and blood." He wished he sounded more convinced. The city was teetering on the edge of hysteria. The commissioner, a portly man whose usual bluster had been replaced by a nervous tremor, had given him a week. 1 week to catch a phantom. A personal tragedy. The arrival of Dr. Meena Sharma brought a different kind of intensity to the grim scene. Young and fiercely intelligent, she moved with a quiet confidence that intrigued Raghavan. As she meticulously documented the wounds in the tailor's small shop, her brow furrowed in concentration. He noticed the way her dark hair, pulled back in a practical bun, framed a face of intense focus. There was a quiet strength about her that was a stark contrast to the hysteria gripping the city. "Inspector," she said, her voice soft but firm, meeting his gaze. "Notice the edges of these lacerations. Some appear unusually clean, almost deliberate, and the depth of penetration in certain areas is inconsistent with a single powerful bite." Raghavan leaned closer, his skepticism momentarily wavering. He had been so focused on the overall brutality that he had overlooked these subtle anomalies. "Explain," he urged, his voice surprisingly gentle. A tiger's teeth and claws would inflict tearing and crushing damage. Here we see evidence of slicing, almost as if a sharp instrument was used in conjunction with the animalistic mauling. Dr. Sharma's words hung in the humid air, a discordant note in the symphony of fear. Raghavan felt a flicker of respect for her sharp intellect. Then came the call that would forever alter Raghavan's calm resolve. His niece, Priya, a vibrant young artist with a laugh like wind chimes and eyes that held the warmth of a Bangalore sunrise, was dead. The news hit Raghavan like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. He felt a profound, chilling emptiness in the pit of his stomach. She had gone to a secluded, overgrown field on the city's rural edge, a place she loved for its wild beauty and quiet inspiration to sketch the sunrise. It was there, amidst the dew-kissed tall grass, that the beast found her. A local farmer, Krishnan, on his way to his fields at dawn, discovered her. His old bullock cart stood abandoned nearby, its contents spilled. Krishnan, still trembling hours later, could only describe a blur of movement in the pre-dawn gloom, a flash of something dark and fast, and a guttural roar that wasn't quite a tiger's. He had stumbled upon the scene moments after the attack, finding Priya's body amidst the trampled grass, a grotesque mockery of her artistic pursuit. He saw the beast move away, a large, dark shape disappearing into the tree line, leaving behind the horrific tableau. He could give no more details, his mind clouded by terror. Raghavan rushed to the scene. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood. Seeing Priya, his beautiful niece, lying there, her body a mutilated ruin of gashed flesh and splintered bone, sent a cold shock through him that transcended mere professional horror. Her drawing pad lay discarded nearby, a half-finished sketch of the banyan tree staring blankly at the sky. He knelt, unable to touch her, the tears stinging his eyes. This was no longer just a case. This was personal. The beast of Bangalore had reached into his own family, tearing at his very soul. Every fibre of his being now screamed for justice for Priya. Her laughter, once so vivid in his memory, now echoed as a mournful whisper. Meena found him there, his shoulders hunched, his face etched with a grief so profound it seemed to pull the air from the space around them. She knelt beside him, not speaking, but her presence was a quiet anchor in his storm. She placed a hand gently on his arm, a gesture of silent comfort that spoke volumes. He looked at her then, his eyes raw with pain, and in her gaze he saw not just professional empathy, but a genuine sorrow that mirrored his own. In that moment of shared grief, a subtle connection formed between them, an unspoken understanding that would deepen with each passing day. The arrival of Alistair Finch only amplified the city's anxieties. A wiry Englishman with eyes as cold and sharp as polished steel, Finch strode into Bangalore like a conquering hero, his pronouncements echoing through the colonial-era press. A rogue man-eater, he declared, his voice laced with a self-assured authority that grated on Raghavan's nerves. A magnificent, albeit dangerous specimen. I shall track it down and put an end to this senseless carnage. Finch, with his retinue of local trackers and his gleaming rifle, became an instant sensation. The terrified populace saw him as their savior, a valiant hunter ready to slay the beast of their nightmares. Raghavan, however, saw a self-serving opportunist, eager for fame and a prize trophy. Now, with Priya's lifeless image burned into his mind, Raghavan's disdain for Finch deepened into a burning resentment. This wasn't about glory. It was about stopping a monster that had brutally murdered his niece. He carried the weight of her death with every step, a constant ache in his chest. Raghavan found solace and quiet strength in Meena's presence. Her scientific objectivity was grounding, her unwavering focus a beacon in the storm of his grief. He began to seek her out, not just for professional consultation, but for the quiet comfort her presence offered. She listened patiently as he recounted his fragmented thoughts, her intelligent eyes never leaving his. Raghavan's investigation took him through the labyrinthine alleys and bustling marketplaces of Bangalore. He spoke to terrified neighbours, their voices hushed with fear, their descriptions of the beast ranging from a shadowy blur to a tiger of unnatural size and ferocity. He consulted with zoologists at the Bangalore University, who confirmed the presence of tigers in the surrounding forests but deemed it highly unusual for one to venture so deep into the city and exhibit such relentless aggression. The image of Priya's mangled body drove him forward, pushing him past exhaustion and despair. He worked tirelessly, driven by the ghost of her memory. He even sought out the wisdom of old Chennaya, a wizened tracker from a nearby tribal community, whose knowledge of the jungle was legendary. Chennaya listened patiently to Raghavan's account, his eyes clouded with a primal understanding. "The jungle has its laws, Inspector," he said, his voice raspy. "A tiger kills for food, not for this desecration." Chennaya's words echoed Raghavan's growing unease. This wasn't the work of a natural predator. This was something far more twisted, something that had stolen Priya from him. 2. The false triumph. Alistair Finch, astride a magnificent elephant, led his expedition into the dense foliage bordering Bangalore. His retinue, a motley crew of local trackers and eager porters, fanned out, their anticipation a palpable current in the humid air. Days blurred into a tense tapestry of tracking, the jungle's whispers amplified by their heightened senses. Then, on the third dawn, the jungle erupted. A guttural roar tore through the pre-dawn quiet, followed by the crashing of undergrowth. Finch, his eyes gleaming with a predatory glint, raised his gleaming rifle. The beast, A truly immense Bengal tiger charged from the thicket, its striped coat blurring into a terrifying streak. The crack of Finch's rifle echoed, precise and deadly. The tiger, its momentum carrying it a few more staggering feet, collapsed with a final, shuddering exhalation, its magnificent form now tragically still. They returned to Bangalore like conquering heroes, the immense tiger carcass draped across a specially constructed cart, its lifeless eyes staring blankly at the cheering crowds. Finch, dismounting with theatrical flourish in the bustling town square, raised a triumphant hand. "The beast of Bangalore is no more," he boomed, his voice resonating with self-congratulation. "We have rid this fair city of its terror. You may all sleep soundly now, for the man-eater has met its end." The crowd erupted in cheers, a collective sigh of relief rippling through the terrified populace. Raghavan, however, felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He pushed through the throng, his gaze fixed on the lifeless tiger, then on Finch's smug face. "You are mistaken, Finch," Raghavan stated, his voice low but firm, cutting through the celebratory din. "This is not the killer." Finch turned, a condescending smile playing on his lips. "Ah, Inspector Raghavan, still clinging to your doubts? Look at this magnificent specimen. The ferocity, the sheer size. It is precisely as the witnesses describe." He gestured grandly to the tiger. "The wounds on the victims," Raghavan countered, stepping closer, his voice gaining an edge. "They were not consistent with the tiger's attack. There were irregularities, surgical precision in some lacerations. This animal is a scapegoat." Finch chuckled, a dismissive sound. "My dear Inspector, I sympathize with your grief. The loss of your niece, a tragic affair indeed. It is only natural that your judgment might be clouded by such a personal sorrow. You seek a more complex villain, perhaps, when the truth is staring you in the face. This is the beast." He clapped a hand on Raghavan's shoulder, a gesture of false camaraderie that made Raghavan's blood boil. "Let us celebrate this victory, Inspector. The people need to believe the nightmare is over." Raghavan shrugged off Finch's hand. "The nightmare," he said, his eyes burning with an intensity that belied his calm demeanor, "is far from over. And this animal's death will not bring peace to anyone." Raghavan watched as Finch, basking in the adulation, began to recount the heroic hunt to a captivated audience. Every boast, every dramatic flourish, grated on Raghavan's raw nerves. The crowd, desperate for relief, swallowed Finch's narrative whole, their cheers a deafening testament to their need for closure. But Raghavan knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that this wasn't closure. This was a dangerous delusion. He turned away, the festive atmosphere feeling grotesque, and found Dr. Sharma standing at the edge of the square, her expression mirroring his own grim resolve. Their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement of the shared truth they both carried. "He's wrong," Raghavan stated, not needing to elaborate. Meena nodded, her gaze fixed on the dead tiger. "Completely. The striations on the bones, Inspector, the clean cuts, they are not consistent with purely animalistic predation, and the metallic traces we found." Her voice trailed off, but her meaning was clear. The evidence spoke a different truth, one that Finch, in his hunger for glory, was willfully ignoring. Her presence was a comforting, steadying force for Raghavan. Sergeant Kumar, his initial relief now replaced by a familiar apprehension, approached them cautiously. "But Inspector, the people, they want to believe. They're so scared." "Fear makes people blind, Kumar," Raghavan retorted, his voice tight with frustration. "And a blind city is an even more dangerous one." The image of Priya's lifeless face, so vivid in his memory, fueled his anger. Finch's spectacle was not only a lie, it was putting more lives at risk. The true beast was still out there, emboldened by the city's false sense of security, perhaps even amused by the grand charade. Raghavan knew he had to act, and quickly. Finch's victory had bought the real killer time, and that time was a luxury Raghavan couldn't afford to give. He looked from the jubilant crowd to the still, silent tiger, then back to the determined faces of Meena and Sergeant Kumar. "We have work to do," he declared, his resolve hardening. "The beast hasn't been caught. Not yet." He met Mina's gaze, and in her unwavering support he found renewed strength. The hunt, he realized, was far from over. It had only just begun. 3. The shadow of a twisted mind. A recurring name surfaced in Raghavan's inquiries. Shankar, a former taxidermist who had once possessed a meticulous skill in preserving the forms of the dead. Shankar had been a respected figure in his niche, his workshop filled with the silent, glassy-eyed replicas of creatures both familiar and exotic. But then whispers began, strange experiments, an unhealthy obsession with his subjects, a descent into a peculiar isolation. He had been ostracized by his community after a series of disturbing incidents involving the mishandling of human remains at the local crematorium. Raghavan found Shankar living in a dilapidated bungalow on the outskirts of the city, a place where the scent of formaldehyde mingled with the musty odor of decay. The garden was overgrown, the windows grimy, the silence broken only by the buzzing of flies. Shankar himself was a gaunt figure, his eyes unnervingly bright, his movements jerky and unpredictable. His dwelling was a bizarre museum of death, stuffed birds perched on dusty shelves, the vacant stares of mounted deer heads fixed on unseen horrors, and the unsettlingly lifelike forms of smaller mammals arranged in unnatural poses. Raghavan's initial conversations with Shankar were unsettling. The man spoke in cryptic pronouncements, his words laced with a strange reverence for the natural world and a barely concealed bitterness towards humanity. He possessed an unnerving knowledge of animal anatomy, his descriptions of muscle structure and bone density disturbingly precise. When Raghavan questioned him about the recent murders, Shankar's eyes would flicker with an unsettling intensity, his answers evasive and shrouded in metaphor. "The beast within," Shankar would murmur, his gaze drifting to a stuffed jackal with bared teeth. "It can be far more savage than any creature of the jungle. It knows no bounds, no pity." Raghavan clenched his jaw, the image of Priya's bright eyes, now forever closed, searing into his mind. No pity indeed. As Raghavan pieced together the fragmented accounts of Shankar's past, a disturbing picture emerged. A childhood trauma involving a tiger attack that left him scarred both physically and mentally, a fascination with death that bordered on the macabre, a growing resentment towards the city that had shunned him. The pieces began to click into place, forming a horrifying mosaic. The face of the monster that had taken Priya was finally beginning to emerge from the shadows. Raghavan revisited the crime scenes, this time with Shankar's unsettling presence in his mind. He noticed details he had previously overlooked, the almost artistic arrangement of some of the wounds, the way certain muscle groups were exposed with an almost surgical precision. He remembered Mina's observations about the clean cuts and the inconsistent damage. Could it be that the beast of Bangalore was not a tiger at all, but a man meticulously recreating its savagery? His heart pounded with a terrible certainty. Priya's injuries, the precise lacerations, the unnatural depth, they all pointed to this grotesque truth. His resolve hardened he would see justice for her. His suspicions solidified when Mina discovered minute traces of a metallic substance within some of the wounds, fragments too small to be tiger claws or teeth. Under the microscope, they appeared to be slivers of sharpened steel. She brought him the evidence, her hand brushing his as she showed him the magnified images. In her steady gaze, he found courage and a shared sense of purpose. 4. Confrontation and vengeance. The confrontation at Shankar's bungalow was inevitable. Raghavan, accompanied by a wary Sergeant Kumar and Mina, whose face was pale but determined, approached the dilapidated house under the oppressive twilight. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and something else, something metallic and faintly sickening. Mina stayed close to Raghavan, her hand instinctively finding his as they entered the chilling silence of the garden. Inside, the scene was even more disturbing than before. Shankar's workshop, hidden behind a false wall, was a nightmarish tableau. Crude surgical tools lay scattered on a blood-stained table alongside taxidermy implements. Sketches depicting the precise anatomical structure of a tiger were pinned to the wall, alongside chilling drawings of human figures being brutally mauled. In one corner, Raghavan's blood ran cold as he discovered crude prosthetics, sharpened metal claws attached to leather gloves, designed to mimic the deadly weaponry of a tiger. This was it, the horror that had destroyed Priya. He felt Mina's grip tighten on his hand, her silent horror mirroring his own. Shankar emerged from the shadows, his eyes blazing with a manic light. He held a scalpel in one hand, its polished surface reflecting the dim light, and a pair of the makeshift claws in the other. "They called me mad," he hissed, his voice a raspy whisper. "They scorned my art. Now they will know true terror. They will tremble before the beast I have unleashed." He lunged, a grotesque parody of a charging tiger, the metal claws glinting menacingly. Raghavan reacted instantly, drawing his service revolver. The small workshop became a scene of chaotic violence, the air filled with Shankar's demented cries and the metallic clang of the makeshift claws against the furniture. Mina, though terrified, remained by Raghavan's side, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fierce resolve. Sergeant Kumar struggled to subdue the deranged taxidermist. Raghavan moved with a grim determination, every action fueled by the memory of Priya and the comforting presence of Mina by his side. This was for her. In the ensuing struggle, Shankar tripped, falling against a shelf laden with preserved specimens. A stuffed mongoose, its glass eyes staring blankly, tumbled down, striking Shankar's head with a sickening thud. He lay still, his manic gaze fixed on the ceiling, a thin trickle of blood seeping from his temple. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the ragged breathing of Raghavan and Kumar. Mina quickly knelt, her medical training taking over, checking Shankar's pulse. The reign of the beast of Bangalore was over, not with the triumphant roar of a hunted animal, but with the pathetic thud of a fallen madman. Raghavan looked at Shankar, a strange mix of sorrow and grim satisfaction washing over him. The immediate rage had subsided, replaced by a deep sense of a burden lifted. Priya was avenged. He looked at Mina, who stood up and quietly nodded, confirming Shankar was no longer a threat. In her eyes he saw not just a colleague but a partner, a confidant, and something more profound that bloomed in the quiet aftermath of horror. Epilogue: the unsettling truth. The revelation of the truth sent shockwaves through the city. The magnificent, terrifying tiger that had haunted their nightmares was nothing more than a phantom, a grotesque illusion conjured by a twisted mind. Alistair Finch, his grand pronouncements now echoing with an embarrassing hollowness, quietly packed his bags and left Bangalore. Inspector Raghavan, initially met with skepticism for his doubts, was now hailed as a hero. Yet there was no true triumph in his heart, only a profound weariness and the lingering ache of grief. He had stared into the abyss of human madness and found it far more terrifying than any creature of the wild. The memory of Priya's brutalized body would forever haunt him, a personal scar in the fight against an unseen horror, but the knowledge that her killer could no longer harm anyone brought a quiet sense of closure. Weeks later, Raghavan found himself at the Bangalore Zoo, standing before the tiger enclosure. Mina stood beside him, her presence a familiar comfort. Their hands brushed, and he felt a quiet warmth spread through him. Their shared experience had forged a bond that transcended their professional lives. He had come to rely on her intellect, her unwavering support, and the quiet understanding in her eyes. The powerful forms of the tigers, their striped coats, their raw, untamed beauty, they were the innocent scapegoats in a city's nightmare. He watched a magnificent male pace with fluid grace, its amber eyes holding an ancient, primal intelligence. "You are not the beast," Raghavan murmured, almost to himself, though his words were for Mina too. "You are just a creature of the jungle, bound by its laws." He thought of the farmer, Krishnan, and his terrified account of the dark blur. He thought of Mina's meticulous notes, detailing the surgical precision of the wounds. And he thought of Shankar, the hollow-eyed man consumed by his own warped vision. He closed his eyes for a moment, and Priya's face, vibrant and full of life, materialized in his mind. He saw her laughing, her sketches, her boundless energy. Then the horrific image of her lifeless body tried to force its way in, but Raghavan pushed it back, holding onto the light. "Goodbye, my dear Priya," he whispered, a silent farewell carried on the humid air. "You can rest now. The shadow has been lifted, Meena squeezed his hand gently. "And so can you, Raghavan," she said softly, her voice filled with understanding and a nascent tenderness. The true beast of Bangalore had not been a creature of instinct, but a man consumed by his own demons, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can fester within the human heart, a shadow far more insidious and enduring than the fleeting stripes of a jungle predator. The humid air of Bangalore still held a chill, not of fear of a phantom, but of the unsettling truth they had uncovered, and of the profound personal cost Raghavan had paid to bring it to light. He turned and walked away from the enclosure, Meena by his side, her hands still in his. The quiet ache in his heart was a permanent reminder, but now, finally, intertwined with a sense of avenged peace and the quiet promise of a future shared.